Welcome back to Education Matters. Did you correctly answer all of those groups? That's what our poll found. Both Republican men and women and independent men and women favor changing their state school funding to ensure more fairness between wealthy and poor communities. Now, joining us now to continue our discussion is former North Carolina Senator, State Senator, former Chairman of the State Board of Education, also former cabinet member under Jim Hunt. I got it all here. And of course, a lot of folks got to know Howard Lee as the first African American to hold the position as mayor of Chapel Hill way back in 1969. Really the first African American to hold that role in any predominantly white city in the South.
In the South, yes. I'm a Southerner.
You're a Southerner,
out.
which is why I wanted you on the show this week, because when we were working on this report with Alan and our partners in these other states, and it was about the changing South and the gains and the challenges and the remains. You were the first person that came to my mind because this is really your life story in many ways.
Right.
I mean, you grew up in a very deeply segregated Jim Crow South in Georgia. You came up here, thankfully, we're glad you did, ended up in Chapel Hill. Helped change some of the things that were happening. So talk to me a little bit about sort of your own, sort of what you've seen in your life in this sort of changing education story of the South.
Well, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to chat with you, Keith. I, of course, went to a segregated school, very poor school. I like to tell the story that I had no new desk, no new textbooks, or any of the materials that were needed in order to have a sound basic education. But I had the most important ingredient of all, and that were good teachers. And so I've spent most of my life through the Hunt years and as a member of the General Assembly and as a person who's been involved in early childhood education, really focused on how we can get good teachers into our schools and into our classrooms. And I think I've seen some really good progress made, but I've also been disappointed in our ability to have closed the gap as much as I'd hoped we would.
So you started out talking about teachers, which is always a great place to start. That was one of the themes and priorities that came out in this report, was that we have to continue to focus on not just getting enough warm bodies, but we need to get great teachers.
Absolutely.
And so that's that certainly, I guess, resonated. The other thing was early childhood. You mentioned both of those. So you think that those are still very much key to success?
Oh, without a doubt. I think if we don't continue to put emphasis on preparing kids at the earliest possible age, and especially having them perform at grade level by the time they reach the third grade, we're already in trouble. Doesn't mean that the ball game is over and that we can't continue to make progress with the kids, but it's going to be a lot more challenging. But I think teachers make a difference. I set up an institute about 5 years ago and created what I call small learning groups in middle school and in an elementary school. The idea being to have a teacher who was well prepared and who could give concentrated attention to supporting those kids. It's worked out extremely well, and kids who ordinarily would have been engaged in experiencing the achievement gap have shown remarkable progress and ability to learn.
Well, let me ask, thinking about the sort of the study in the South, sort of what are the things you look at and say we did really well? I mean, over those decades, or what were the things that were the most progress we made? Some of the game changers, and then what sort of where did we sort of miss it, or at least didn't go far enough?
Well, I think we've certainly put the emphasis where it should be, and that is on providing adequate income for teachers and giving them the support in the classroom. We've done well, I think, in training principals. We've set up a number of programs that would allow principals to become more skilled in providing leadership within the schools. I guess the one thing that concerns me most about our school performance is the distance between the school and the community. Kids are being moved from one side of town to the other side of town, and in doing that, we leave parents behind, and so we've taken the parent out of the equation to a great extent if that parent is incapable of being able to make the trip across town.
That's interesting you brought that up, because that has been, that's one of the challenges we've seen schools. I mean, you lived through the integration, desegregation. There are obviously two different meanings, but some folks have been concerned that moving toward neighborhood schools and things like that actually has exacerbated some of that. But you're also suggesting that there are things about going to school nearby that you think were important?
I'm a very strong advocate for neighborhood schools. I know people say to me, look, if we go back to neighborhood schools, we'll have segregated schools. Well, we have them anyway.
Right.
Our schools really are highly minority occupied. The difference is that if we lose that neighborhood support and that engagement of the community, and I'm not suggesting this is the case for high schools, it certainly is important for middle schools and it's important for elementary schools. I work with one elementary school in Durham where we have a fantastic principal, and he's been able to get the community more engaged with his school, and so with volunteers, he's able to get folk in that can help kids. In my own situation, I'm a member of a golf club, and many of our members are extremely wealthy and might be described as very conservative, and people you wouldn't think would be excited about being involved in public schools. But they have stepped up, several of them, and they've created a fund to give to this elementary school and to this principal that allows him to buy a book for every third grader in that school. And so we're going to meet next week to go out and see what kind of progress these kids are making. But it's going to take the community really getting more committed and engaged in supporting our schools. I think we've missed another boat. I think we've missed is when we first began this journey with Jim Hunt. We engaged corporations and businesses in support of these initiatives. And we've lost some of that, and I want to see that come back again. I was meeting with a corporation here yesterday, Biogen, which has created a community room in its building, and they've done a fantastic job of serving kids. I'd like to see us move back in that direction, and I think if we do that, we can have tremendous success. Our kids can learn. I'm absolutely concerned about black males.
And that's where I wanted to wrap it up with you on the last question, because I know that's been in this fifth part of your career, you've really been focused on the black boys and young black males that are being left behind. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I'm really concerned that we have missed the boat with saving some of these black males students, but what I've learned is that with the right kind of nurturing, the right kind of exposure, these boys become more engaged in academic activities and certainly demonstrate propensity for being able to learn and succeed academically. I've had good success at 2 middle schools and 1 elementary school and 1 high school, which has turned out to be extremely well in terms of outcome.
Last comment, I would think that the survey results that you saw us talk about earlier would be encouraging to you. It does, and it maybe not even a surprise when you mentioned your friends and your golfing buddies, that it is cut across party lines. People do care about achievement for all children.
You know, we get so hung up on philosophy sometimes and labels that we get blinded to the extent of the goodness that is in many people if they just simply are asked, or if they're invited, or if they're accepted for being engaged. And so I think that possibility looms large for us going forward.
Amen. I like that close. Thank you very much, Senator Howard Lee, for being here. After the break, this week's Leadership Spotlight.